Hello and Happy New Year. Welcome to Life on Mars, the MarsBased podcast. And in today's episode, I'm going to be introducing an interview that was done in November 2019. I was interviewed at IndieHackers Barcelona. IndieHackers is a community for bootstrap businesses and indie makers of apps and self-employed people building small micro SaaS, small micro companies, and eventually some of them will progress to being huge overlords of the industry, right? Like that's the exception perhaps of Automatic, a company of WordPress, or Buffer, or a Basecamp, big companies that started really small. They started bootstrapping, and once they found the scale, once they found a huge opportunity in the market, maybe they decided to raise funds or not, they continue to be bootstrapped, but they grew to have hundreds, if not thousands of employees. In this case, I was interviewed by my friend Tahir in IndieHackers Barcelona. And even though this interview is a little bit old, it's about 2.5 years old, there's a lot of stuff that's really relevant to nowadays in the company, because we will see the progression of what I told you in the previous episode when I was going through the changes that we've undergone as a company in the last 6 months, compared to our opinions on certain things in late 2019. For instance, in this conversation, it's about half an hour long, it's not very long, we go through the lore and the creation of MarsBased. This is really interesting because a lot of people are asking, like, hey, how did you meet your co-founders? How did you get this idea? When did you decide to start a business? How did you do it, right? So here we talk at length about how we quit our jobs, what kind of jobs we were doing earlier, how we know each other, where do we know each other from, did we have prior experiences in the past in the same field or maybe working together. We cover all of this and much more. It's really interesting, especially if you're working on MarsBased. You will love to hear some stories from the early days and even from prior to creating the business. The second point we address in this conversation is how to start two businesses at the same time, because I started MarsBased, or we started MarsBased, and I started Startup Grind Barcelona at the same time. That even though they're not two separate businesses, because Startup Grind, I don't run it as a separate business, it started as something independent from MarsBased, because that was more of a personal project. And if I was going to play the entrepreneurial lottery, I was going to play with two tickets, right? So I started two things at the same time, even though 1.5 years or maybe 2 years in, we decided to merge both initiatives, and eventually Startup Grind Barcelona became the event of MarsBased, and now we do it within the company, with a budget, with a team inside MarsBased, whereas in the first year and a half, I used to do it separately on my extra time, on weekends, and after my work at MarsBased was done. And of course, that created a lot of burnout, that created a lot of stress, especially financial stress, because I was starting a company and then I was paying for the motherfucking catering and beers at Startup Grind Barcelona. But anyways, back to MarsBased. We also talk about product, because back then, I think we had already taken the decision to shut down the product that we tried to build from 2018 to 2019. So we talk about the idea, I talk about the roadmap, I talk about what happened. I'm not gonna spoil it, but there was like a big changing moment in the day one of building the product. Not a lot of people know that we've tried to build a product inside the company. Didn't go well. Probably one of these days we'll record an episode to talk about that, to do kind of like a post-mortem. But it's been a while now. But it's interesting to see how the idea progressed. How did we plan it? How did we forecast the budgeting and the timelines and whatnot? And how we knew this was just not going to go very well. However, we give a lot of healthy advice on how to build a product, because of course a lot of people try to diversify their services and product too early in the company. We tried to do it when we were stable enough, when we had built a team, when we had a lot of money in the bank, and we could create these reserves in order to sustain having 2 or 3 non-productive people in the company. And by non-productive, I mean people you don't bill their hours, right? So they're not working on a client, you're not earning money through them, so therefore they're considered as non-productive people. Another interesting conversation we talk about in this IndieHackers interview is how to be remote and sell B2B. Because most companies being remote, usually they are like B2C businesses. And in the services industry, so maybe they're also selling, B2B SaaS, because that's something that eventually sells itself through the product, through integrators, through platforms, through whatever. But B2B and a sales-driven business like ours, where you have to be building trust, building rapport, selling to people, managing accounts, visiting people, it's really weird that a company doing these kind of services and selling this kind of trust and expertise is 100% remote, and in our case is officeless. So therefore, that means that our clients cannot come to our office, they cannot see how we work, we cannot invite them to show them, our working environment, our dynamics, our office spaces with thousands of post-its and like color post-its around the office and big words written on the wall. We don't have that. We've never had that. In spite of that, we've had a lot of clients whom we've never met throughout the entire career that we're building here at MarsBased. And for some of them, we've been working for like 5, 6, 7 years, and we have never met them in real life, which is really weird, but it happens, right? It just requires different kinds of skills, different kinds of people. And so we talk at length about trust. We talk at length about how to build this kind of confidence, not only with the clients, but also with the team, how to know that everybody's working, how to treat people well, how to become a great leader, and also how to build bootstrap businesses and how to hire for them. Because this is something that we don't speak very publicly about, or we really never address that much. But hiring, it's complicated. It's becoming even more complicated now, but it was complicated in 2019 when we were doing this interview. But back then, we had already decided to start hiring more junior profiles. So just to be more correct about it, less senior profiles, right? And so we were, I think back then, we were just 1 month shy away from hiring our first junior developers. And they turned out to be great investments. They turned out to work really well. And so really happy about that decision. But I go, and in this interview, I explained very well, and I think very in much more detail, why we had decided not to hire junior developers for the 5 first years of the company, right? So how to hire on a bootstrap company, how to hire in this kind of all remote environments, how to hire and nurture and coach and mentor less senior people, and how to hire abroad, because the Spanish regulation is really, really complicated. These are all of the topics that we're covering in this interview, so I hope that you will enjoy this one and that you will have very restful winter break, and that you will be seeing each other in the rest of episodes of MarsBased in this new season of Life on Mars. So let's jump right into it.
Well, thanks for coming. I know you're super busy traveling a lot, bootstrapping MarsBased, and also running Startup Grind. So I think what would be interesting to know is kind of your background. I know that Àlex is a developer in the past, actually Java developer, and moving into freelancer and then starting your own company about 5 years ago. So just tell us what's your background and how did you start the company?
Great, I'm a developer. I studied computer science just because I started messing around with computers when I was 8, and I started tearing parts apart when I was 8, and then I didn't know how to mount the things back. I was like, well, I have a problem here. But then I started messing with websites, right? It was not very popular around my school to get access to internet, so I was going to friends' houses to actually play on games and mess on the internet, because back then, there was this thing called, I think it was Alta Vista and all these old school searchers way before Google. And I thought there was a lot of potential there, right? And I started looking for cheats for video games, and there were many websites, but lots of them, they were just in English. And I said, what if I could do the same in Spanish, right, for my friends who don't speak any English? And I started creating websites, basically. I started programming PHP. This is something I don't say out publicly, because it's not a great thing to say. I'm sorry if you develop in PHP. But then I transitioned to other languages, right? I studied computer science, started working then in consulting, old school consulting. So as you can see me here, I've been part of Deloitte and companies like that, wearing a suit and a tie. And that's probably where I get the inspiration to create my own company after all these years of working in different environments, right? I have been freelancing. I created an association in the university. I work in research in the sort of an hybrid company between university and a private company, and then big consultancies.
Right, but you are not alone, right? I mean, you have 2 co-founders. Xavi and Jordi, right?
That's right.
So how did you meet each other and how did you decide to start a company together?
Well, the first thing, we've known each other since kindergarten, so that's easy. The hard part is to create a company with your two best friends, right? They say it's like as a general rule of thumb, you shouldn't create a company with friends or family or stuff like that. Fuck that. That's great if you want to follow the entrepreneurial ABC, and you can maximize your chances of success if you follow this ABC, but there are other ways around it, right? Like bootstrapping is an option, but most people will tell you you should raise funds for your company, right? And basically, that's the story of how I met them, but how they convinced me to join the company, it was, we would always do this monthly dinner with my two best friends, but actually we were three. That's a part of the story that should be told as well. And one of us, my friend Jordi, was always like, hey, we should create a company, we should create a company. He would monopolize the dinners by saying we should create a company because he was fed up with the company he was working for, right? He had always worked at just one company, whereas the other two had been working in several companies. But it was like, he studied something like librarianship, so not computer science, so not a useful degree, and that's on video, right? That's great. He's gonna love that. And so probably I don't know, that's my opinion. Probably he thought like, wow, out of this company, there's probably no other options for me, right? Well, he was the CTO, so go figure, he's really bright. And then he said, we're all fed up of our companies because my other co-founder and I, were also working on other companies we're not entirely happy with. And we said like, look, if these people, to put it politely, are making lots of money, lots of millions, by producing shit, how about we create our own company? We just do great work and we live, happily enough with a sufficient level of comfort, and we can actually sleep at night and have like a clean karma, things like that. So that's how after a couple of years, he convinced us to, hey, let's start this. Let's give it a try. We're 28. If we don't do it now, when are we going to do it, right? Our careers were intertwined many times in the past, but never the three at the same time, right? Jordi hired Xavi to be the CTO of his former company. I had to work with Xavi in a project. They did some freelancing together, but never the three at the same time. I said, okay, let's do it.
Right. Well, interesting. I think it's been 5 years now, right, that you run the company? Yeah. And when, just like curious, when this startup grind thing started, and I think it has been also like 5 years now, as I remember. By the way, one interesting thing about Àlex and Startup Grind is you have run now 66 events, right? Or 65?
I think it's 69.
69 events over 5-6 years.
You'll get there, don't worry.
Yeah, without missing a single event every month. So that's like absolutely crazy. So when has it started and why did you decide to take on this initiative?
All right, so circling back to these dinners with my best friends, I was perhaps the most available to quit the company with no safety net, right? I think one of them was expecting a child. The other one had just gotten a new job, like a really good job, and they were both making like big money. And I've always been more like the crazy one. I wouldn't say the more entrepreneurial one, but I would say, I do things without thinking too much. That's great for being an entrepreneur. That's not great if you're going to be a businessman, right? So I said, fuck it, I'm just quitting my company, and I left it. And I packed my things and I left for San Francisco for 3 months, where I burned all my money, all my savings in 3 months. I didn't expect it to be so fucking expensive. And sorry about I use a lot of swear words. I hope you like them. It's courtesy of, it's yours truly. So I went to San Francisco and I said, I started looking for clients there, right? It's the cradle of entrepreneurship, technology, innovation, everything, what have you. I was looking for a new place to live, and I said probably I could settle here. Then I learned about the immigration laws in the US, which are not especially permitting, right? And so while I was looking for new projects there, I was invited, I received, the typical newsletter of Eventbrite. Hey, you should check these events out. Because I was just going to every event in San Francisco, like literally every event. I even went to the Beer Olympics. Wow. You do an event which is the Beer Olympics, 300 people sign up, and all of them were like product managers at Apple, Cisco, developers at Twitter, something like that. You do the same thing here, you get all walks of life. but nobody with a job, right? It's like, it would be a mess. Like in San Francisco, nobody's outside of the tech world, right? So that goes to say I got an invitation to go to Startup Grind, and I checked the website, and they were looking for people in Barcelona, because Startup Grind is the largest community of entrepreneurs in the world. Basically, back then, they were big in America. That's it. They had like 40 chapters there, and maybe like 3, 4 outside of the US. They were looking for people to expand. And they have local chapters like this all around the world, right? But they were looking for people in the key cities of Europe, right? And then, you know, first, the biggest cities like Barcelona, Milan, and Paris, and Rome, and Munich, and things like that. I said, well, I'm from Barcelona, I'm going to apply this. If I am going to play the entrepreneurial lottery, I'm going to play with two tickets, right? I was not convinced MarsBased was going to take off. I was not convinced Startup Grind was going to take off. What I certainly couldn't predict is both of them, they would work so well, right? So I applied. I got through the selection process, which was a fun story. And then I got the chapter. As you said, since April 2014, we've never missed a month. And so it's 69 events in 66 months so far.
Wow, that's amazing. But I guess like running Startup Grind and like you being in the center of all these kind of ecosystem and entrepreneurs and networking help you a lot, right, in your business? Or how has it helped you with MarsBased or you personally?
Yeah, so one of the parts of the story that's really fun is they usually look for people who've got an established business, who've got money, because at the beginning it's self-funded, so you got to pay for the catering and the video and shit like that. And the CEO was like, I'm not sure that's going to work. Like, you have no money, you are in the US, but when are you going back to Barcelona? I had a return ticket because I was obliged by the law, right?
Derek, right?
Was that Derek? Yeah.
Okay.
But I didn't have a company, and I didn't have like a plan, right? And I said like, there's something funny. I mean, you made it all the way here. Like, the least we can do is let's try. I had experience in creating events, and I was running. One of the things that probably, you know, gave me the chapter is I was running an event, kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous for entrepreneurs in Barcelona. That was called Startup Circle, and we would meet like in an event like this, all friends creating startups and sharing victories and failures, mostly failures, like 90% of the time was failures. But I was doing twice a month. We were having like 50 people. It was great attendance. It was a great community, and we had the same values. So the CEO said, okay, you're already doing it, so let's try, right? But he gave me a really good piece of advice, and I think that really helped. You should devise a way in which your company profits from Startup Grind and the other way around, right? Like, to this day, I still feel like we don't get enough out of it, because I like to separate things, because I don't want people to perceive or to think even that we're organizing Startup Grind to get clients, which is, it couldn't be farther from the truth, because entrepreneurs don't have money, therefore they cannot be my clients, right? And therefore, there are two separate initiatives, even though we run them jointly. It's just, you know, it's given us exposure, it's given us access to contacts. It's given us press, and I think we've gotten only a couple of projects over the years, right, but we're more than happy with that. We're contributing to the community, and I think we're doing a great job at gluing the different actors of the ecosystem together.
Yeah, interesting. So let's get back to MarsBased, and how many people you have now, and kind of what are your biggest customers?
Depends on whether we've signed a new contract today or not. So we are 14 full-time members on a permanent contract, all working remotely.
Yeah.
And then we've got 6 freelancers employed full-time, so technically that makes a payroll of 20, because some of these freelancers, they've been employed 100% of their time for several years by us. So, you know, I like to make the clarification, I like to specify it, because of transparency is one. You got to make that explicit when you work with clients, and you've got transparency as a rule, precisely because a lot of companies, they would not say that. They would say like, yeah, they're all part of my company, but they are 100% of their company is freelancers, right? And there are some, you know, different shades of transparency here. A lot of people don't adhere to.
Right. One interesting thing, and that comes from my experience being in consulting business. I remember like I joined, I think employee 6, and then when I left, there were like 120 people in consulting firm. And one thing that started in our company was basically a small product, and then eventually would kind of spin off as a separate startup, and lately it was kind of acquired and so on. So I guess my question here is, are you building any products yourself, or are you planning on building any products like, Basecamp, I guess one of those examples?
What do you know exactly?
I don't know anything, but I'm just like asking because that's like pretty common, right, to do.
It's pretty common. It's difficult to find the right moment to do it. So at the beginning of pretty much about a year ago, now it was December last year, when we decided, all right, let's go into product, right? We've been thinking about it. We have some idea. We had been validating some ideas in the market with potential clients and our immediate network. And then we came up with this idea, which I think is really great. I'm going to go into more detail later if needed. But we said, okay, let's build it. At the founders meeting of the last quarter, we made a plan. We made some financials. We made a strategy. We made milestones. We created a GitHub and everything. And the next day, our biggest client puts the project on hold, right? 4 people, overnight, no prior notice. I was like, the fuck do we do now, right? You come up with this strategy and we couldn't implement it because our immediate thoughts were to shift to sales, right? We needed to find new projects because we couldn't afford. It's not like we couldn't afford. Like we could have put these people to work there, but 4 people at the same time, it was a big commitment. We were ready to put 1, maybe 2, but not 4, definitely, right? And then we knew that another contract was going to run out soon. I said, we are not going to jeopardize the future of the company by going nuts over this, right? So we said, okay, let's kind of take it easy. And then we put extra pressure on selling, getting new contracts. That worked. It worked so well that 2 months later, we were hiring. We hired 2 people. Then we hired 2 more people. So that push came really well. Also, we got rid of a client that was paying at random times, sometimes after 3 months, sometimes after 10. And then we found another client that was as big and they pay regularly. So perfect. It was a good move, right? It was great for the company in hindsight, but obviously you couldn't predict that, right? So right now with this project, this side project, we decided to work only. We do one thing every 2 months. We do an internal hackathon. That's called the Stark Rush. If you've played StarCraft, you're probably familiar with the term, where we, for a day, we just get all together online on a Hangouts, and then we hack the shit out of something. Usually we would build something, the new website, or some Ruby gems, or some documentation portal, some proof of concept in another technology. But this year we've been dedicating all of these hackathons, so to speak, to this internal project, right? And we are very close to launching 1 year later. And if all goes well, it should be launched in December.
So how do you decide what to build? Does it come from your customers, or is it your own kind of scratching your own itch?
Look, the fact that we started doing consulting, it's because prior to that, we tried to build 3 different projects that were products, right? But we came to the conclusion that we're not great at coming up with ideas. We're good at developing. Therefore, we said, all right, let other people figure out how to do sales, product management, and marketing, and operations, hiring, whatever, pricing, whatever, right? Over the course of these 5.5 years, we built about 60 products, more or less, and over 100 projects. Therefore, we've got a slight idea right now. We've learned a thing or 2, right? We had some ideas. We just brainstormed some ideas. We had a clear ambition of pursuing B2B SaaS because there are not enough B2B SaaS companies in Spain. Here's a country of marketplaces and copycats and e-commerces. So I said, let's build something more ambitious, something that you can get big contracts, because it's a side project, right? We are not in an urge to sell, and we're already selling to enterprise, right? So maybe we can just go to them, and what can we build that they will need? And we started running around the idea of building something to facilitate hiring, right? Everybody needs to hire developers. So we came up with the idea of building some sort of an automation of the technical tests for developers in your hiring process. But when we were building the MVP, GitHub changed the policies of third-party access to the repositories, roles, and permissions. And that completely messed up with the project, right? With the project vision. And I was like, all right, that was a good idea yesterday. It's not a good idea today. And then we said, okay, now we've built this. Can we reassemble it into something that some people can use it? And then we said, look, another painful process hiring companies have got is language testing, language skills testing, right? And we're working for a couple of HR companies. And they were like, we could use that too. Like we would pay for this, right? We talked to them. I started calling people in the HR departments and companies, and they were like, that sounds like a great idea. So basically, long story short, the idea is, the project is a tool for HR departments and companies to solve or to assess the language skills for your candidates with technology, right? Through an automated telephone call and a written test.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is pretty interesting. It's like moving from consulting into startup where you don't know about how to sell, where to sell, right? So you're basically going through the same journey. What you probably like interviewed a bunch of people, right, with successful products through the startup grind. So I guess my question here is, are there like any common patterns that you see from all these interviews on how to build successful products? Like if you can name 3 patterns that you see, like it happens every time that these successful entrepreneurs are doing to build great products?
That's a great question. I usually don't listen to the people I interview. No, just kidding. Yeah, one of them would be like, you should never give up. And it sounds like a very generic piece of advice. But I've also seen that even like bad products tend to be successful because they never give up, right? It's a good strategy to build good products or bad products. It's a strategy to build products, basically. Most people will buy you because you've been there for like 10 years. Oh, this product has existed for 30 years. It should be good. Must be good, right? We are, like for instance, people hire us now, but they wouldn't hire us when we started because like, oh no, you might shut down tomorrow. What happens? Like now is, oh, you've been around for 5 years and my other providers have shut down, so I'm gonna hire you instead, right? So the same with products, right? It's kind of like, it works for both ways. One part is marketing. It comes top of the mind, right? When you think about phone provider, you probably think of Vodafone or Movistar or whatever, because they've been around for so many years. But you might not know about better alternatives that are out there, right? That's one. The second one is, it would be obviously to talk to customers, but I would argue with that. I would say like, don't talk to customers too soon, right? Because when you don't have enough data, and you don't have enough, like a critical mass of data, a lot of people tend to over-optimize and do A/B testing when they've got 12 visitors in the website. That's not big data. That's not A/B testing. You shouldn't do it there. You shouldn't do it too often, right? And as a consequence of that, I think the third one would be follow your gut. Like talk to a lot of people to find out things that are maybe impossible or maybe not so cost effective or illegal or amoral, things like that, but then follow your own instinct. I think that would be the 3 ones.
Yeah, that's really good one, especially customer development. Like I think the first guest speaker that we had was Rob Fitzpatrick, the author of the Mom Test, and I would really recommend that for the customer development. Oh, that's pretty good. So let's talk about a bit more about MarsBased, because I know that it's a fully remote company and you have been traveling a lot, right? So how are you managing being remote and running this kind of B2B business?
Well, that's a really good question, because being remote makes it extremely difficult to build trust, right? We're doing enterprise sales. Basically, we work for both startups and corporates, but startups hire anything that moves, right? It's like, oh, can you solve this now? But like yesterday? Great, I'll hire you. Great, no problem there. It's there. Like, you come to us when something hurts or you've broke something, and then you come to us through recommendation. Like, you wouldn't Google dentist in Barcelona. You would ask your friends, right? Hey, what's your dentist? What's your hairdresser? Something like that. So in that sense, when people approach us, the sale is already half done. As in, somebody has recommended, they've done some research. It's not me calling. We tried cold calling at the beginning, it wouldn't work, right? And we decided to turn the company into 100% inbound. So that's part of it. Part of it is the client has already bought into the idea of working with us slightly, like to a certain percentage, like 25% of the sale, just because they approach us. It's not the other way around. That's one. And as you mentioned, our company is not only remote, our company is officeless. Like, we don't have an office. Like, we've been contacted by some folks in the industry, including one coworker, which very fine people, and they're like, hey, can you move to our offices? Like, well, we've had known, so yeah, we could, but then, the company doesn't work that way. Most of our employees are not in Barcelona. It would be fine. It would be me and 2 more people, right? Not a great trade-off here. So we've got an office. All of our developers, one of the things that it's tricky is Spain's not really regulated for this. You need to take like how's that called? Like riesgos laborales, so work risk or whatever. And they're like, all of these courses, you take some courses and trainings and they assume you're in an office. I was like, well, we got no office. And where's your emergency exits? Like, not sure what you mean. Like, I've got a door, I've got a balcony, maybe that helps. Things like that, right? And the question was, how do you build trust? So the thing is, this is something we found particularly tricky over the years, that in order to build trust with them, we need to do more like presential work, as in like me, I'm doing the sales, I'm doing the business development of the company. So I spend a considerable amount of time talking to people, going to visit my clients in the office, or talking to them in video calls. Sometimes the clients reside on the other side of the world. I was like, I'm not gonna come every month to Singapore, right? As much as I would love, but it's not worth it. So one policy that's really great we've got is that we always take video calls with the camera on. Really, it makes a difference because you're talking to the other person, you're seeing their face. I mean, it's not as good as being there, but it's not as lazy as having camera off while you're typing something else, you're in a taxi, or you're just in the gym. Everybody has done that. I'm not gonna say something, but like everybody has done that, taking a call from the gym or from the beach, something like that. But it's not good. It's just not acceptable for building trust. Visiting them, I'm taking regular calls with my clients, for instance, and that works because precisely there are 2 things. First of all, you don't build trust if you're not in their office. But the second thing, and it's even more important, is when they see you, they'll be like, oh, now that I've got you, can you also do this, right? If they bump into you in the office, they would just ask you right away, every day. They see you, hey, how's it going? Oh, by the way, we've got a new project for you. Can you do it? Yeah. When I started taking these regular calls like a year ago, we almost doubled the number of projects we got from every client. Now that I got you, I send follow-up emails every month religiously to people. Oh, now that I've got you, can you do this, right? You wouldn't believe how successful this strategy has been just by following up regularly and religiously every month with people you want to have business with, right? Every month in, month out. Always send something. Like, look, we published a handbook. We published this blog post where you're mentioned. We found this company that I think you should invest in, or you could meet because there could be a partnership between you two. If you add value, they will probably reciprocate.
Speaking about handbook, by the way, what I love about MarsBased, they have a handbook for their culture, for the tools, for the processes. It's open source on GitHub, so you should really check it out, right?
You should totally check it out, yeah.
Absolutely. So we are actually running out of time for my questions here. I have like 2 more, and that's more related to...
That means short answers.
Yeah. So as you know, there are a bunch of startup events here, mostly about startups, fundraising, but not so many about bootstrapping companies. So what would you recommend to basically how we can grow bootstrapping ecosystem here in Barcelona?
By doing more events like this, by me hosting more bootstrap companies, because we need to raise awareness of this, right? The same applies for other aspects in life. If we don't have role models where this has been successful, we will not think this is successful, is viable even, right? So I made a commitment to bring more bootstrap companies to my events. Even though one of the criteria for my events is 10 million recurring revenue and 100 employees, whichever comes first. So it's very difficult to find companies like this in Barcelona. But don't worry, you will all have companies like this by the end of next year. So because of you, because of our events, because we need to help each other. And I think that by building community is important. The same way we build community with the English-speaking community of entrepreneurs in Barcelona at Startup Grind, you should nurture this community because it's very healthy. It's healthier than the one that relies on investment.
All right, cool. Thank you. Any questions from the audience to Àlex, maybe? Anyone? Yeah, there is one.
So normally, how do you attract clients that fit with your values? And do you ever reject someone who doesn't?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the easy answer. The difficult answer is sometimes you can't. And that's one lesson we've learned the hard way, right? Sometimes, we're an agency. We rely on billing for every hour that we've got because our clients we bill on time and material basis. We don't do fixed price. We just bill by the hour, right? That's good because it brings predictable revenue and it's easy to plan, but it's bad to bring new clients in, right? It's like you never have capacity. That's one thing we've got now. We've got 4, 5 clients waiting for us to have capacity. We don't have it, right? But when we lost this big client, for instance, or 3 years ago we lost 2 big clients at the same time, it was disastrous, right? We've always been good at having money in the bank because remember, you need to build profitable businesses, right? So that you can have money in the bank because it's good for when there's no money coming in or little money coming in, right? So to answer your question, sometimes you should avoid acting out of desperation when selecting clients. When you're in a position of power, it's easy to say like, no, I'm not gonna work with this because, it's evil and whatever. It's a company whose values I don't agree with, or they do terrible things, they will bring terrible press or whatever. Maybe it's a political party you don't wanna work with, right? But in other parts of your life, then you are condemned to probably take these projects. A couple of times we took projects we shouldn't have taken in hindsight, but probably they helped us to stay afloat for a little longer. But a couple of times we also passed on projects even though we didn't have, we had capacity to take them. We're like, you've got something in your gut telling you this project is gonna go wrong. Like I have this sensation with one potential client right now, and I'm considering just like booting them from, the discussion of pricing, whatever. We're just now revising contract, and they're being so anal about certain things, and they want us to kind of like change the way we work, and they're very pushy. They want everything, and can you answer this in an hour? I'm like, well, we don't work like that. I don't think like this project might be good for my business, money-wise, but it would be bad for my culture and for my people, right? And I can afford losing clients. I cannot afford losing developers. Like in these cases, I think developers come first than clients.
Cool. Any other questions? Oh, there.
Okay, regarding to remote developers, okay, how do you manage collaboration? Are they all in the same time zone? And the second question is, how do you hire junior people when you have a remote team?
So the question was just for the recording. How do you manage remote workers?
And then junior developers. Remote workers, coincidentally, we are all in Spain, even though at the beginning we would hire anybody from anywhere, but just you get most of the applications from here, right? And it might not sound popular, but most of the applications came from here, and we're from here, and they're like, all right, it's easier to accept. Because if the legislation is not prepared for officeless companies, let alone for officeless companies who've got employees abroad, we said, we're gonna go the easy way, because we also cannot afford to fuck around with legislations and this and that and wait to figure it out. Whereas perhaps companies with VC money, they're like, yeah, we'll hire a consultant here, we'll hire like an HR team here, and they'll figure it out, and we can hire people from New freaking Zealand, right? That's not our case. Also, we've got a language constraint, right? Some of our clients are Spanish speaking, some of our clients are Catalan speaking, so therefore we should prioritize people. We prioritize in the beginning people are here. Right now we have expanded our horizons to Southern Europe because we want also to be 1, 2, 3 hours flight from Barcelona. We do a lot of get-togethers, and bringing somebody from Bolivia every month, you have them flying more than actually staying in the city, right? There are a couple of considerations. Time zones is one, but we've got clients all over the world. So we could afford having developers in, for instance, in Central America, because we've got 4 clients in the US right now as we speak. But then I think by creating these people like in a place that's too remote, probably would create a second class of people, right? Because most of them, even they wouldn't be able to come every month, right? And so it's difficult. Right now we're hiring Southwestern Europe. Also, you know, probably we can afford to hire somebody from Norway, for instance, provided they accept our salary, which is unlikely. And the second is that they've got facility or easiness to learn our languages, because sometimes they got to work with Spanish clients. That's one. Second question for Junior, and I'm sorry, I'm going to go a little bit over the time here, because that's a really interesting topic, and it's not addressed properly in conferences and things like that. We are not only a dev agency, we're a consultancy. That's a slight nuance that should be explained, right? As in a dev agency, you probably outsource stuff, they give you back stuff, and you pay them, right? Consultancy, you're expected to be proactive and counsel, right? So some of our clients pay us to give expert advice, right? And right now we're talking to companies that have got hundreds of employees, if not, well, thousands of employees. They hire us to take decisions for them. Their CTO is like, I don't want to take these decisions, you're experts in this technology, I'll trust you. We're freaking 14, right? Our developers must be consultants. And because we are asked, first of all, we had this policy in the company up until this year, more or less, that we only hire people with at least 5 years of experience in technology, because as a small company, bootstrap, and extremely boutique and experts, we just couldn't afford, or we couldn't invest time in teaching people technology and the soft skills to become, we could do one or the other, but not both, right? Now that we've got more structure, we've lowered down a little bit of our criteria. We're hiring 2-3 years now, because right now we've got a program, we've worked on this. We wanted to have more junior people, right? But it's tricky for small companies, and I think we shouldn't push on small companies the policies of the big companies. And that's something that's creating a lot of controversy, and it's not helping the community, right? Because I see a lot of people just investing in things they shouldn't invest, and they don't sell enough, and they die, right? So it's a great question. I hope there would be a way to do it. I think startups should do it. Startups can afford it. They've got investment, they can just put it in the plan. Or some companies whose, let's say, the expected value that the clients have, it's not required, is a level of expertise or seniority. So, but that's because of the thesis of the company. If we start as a, let's say, as a cheaper company, because we wanted to be always on the high end of pricing and quality, but it would say like, okay, we're going to give a good service, not excellent, and we're not going to be experts, we're going to be a generic development company, probably we could have started with that model. But that's one thing that we actually, when I said we learned from our previous companies, we learned a lot from the things that, or how to do things, but how not to do things, right? And these companies, they rely on high rotation of people. Like companies like Deloitte, they've got like 40 to 45 rotation of people every year. That's insane. Like you cannot guarantee long-term maintainability of the projects or quality, because literally every 3 weeks, you are changing the people in the project. That turns into a massive clusterfuck of unreadable code, right? So, and then they rely on pushing people upwards and forcing them to do management. But then people who are, let's say, more technologically savvy and more expert, they go to other companies where their tech expertise is more valued, and they have this new influx of junior people and interns, right? And that just doesn't help, because you're pushing inefficient and probably not as expert people upwards to manage junior people, and that's just even worse, right? You need to have experts that up there with a willingness to teach potentially really skilled people. So,
okay, great. So we are out of time, unfortunately. You can catch Àlex during our networking session here.
Or on Twitter. I spend the whole day on Twitter. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming here. Let's give a big round of applause to Àlex. Thanks.